Hi everyone, and welcome to Jane Talks Real. It's nostalgia time once again, and today I'm going to be looking at Shivers. Shivers was a series of books by M.D. Spenser that was published in the mid to late 90s and consisted of 36 titles aimed at 8 to 14-year-olds that included Weirdo Waldo's Wax Museum, Sweet Home Chicago, The Awful Apple Orchard, and Your Mama's a Werewolf. While I didn't read every single one of them, I did own a fair few of them, and my favourite, which I'll be discussing a little later, I held on to. However, if you want to get hold of physical copies of M.D. Spenser books, they're going to cost you a pretty penny, let me tell you. Because I'm talking about books, there's no video to speak of today, so feel free to put me on in the background while I talk to you about 4 books that will give you shivers. So the thing in room 601 is told from the point of view of Liam, who starts by telling the reader that he and his sister Diane nearly died at a hotel. Dude, spoiler alert! He bangs on for a couple of pages about this hotel called the Hotel Marlowe in Santa Barbara that's kind of weirdly laid out, easy to get lost in, with random 1 or 2 steps about the place. That part has really stuck with me my whole life, and anytime I went anywhere with just 1 or 2 random steps, my brain would always shoot back to this book. By chapter 2 we learn why the hell these kids ended up at this hotel, and it's because some random aunt of theirs was getting married and their parents had stayed at the Hotel Marlowe a number of times before. Liam lays out the plans for the week. They'd fly out with Mum on Tuesday and Dad, who had to work, would fly out on Friday. But the kids are trying to convince Mum to let them bum around the hotel during the day by themselves. They're established to be 12, which is probably why, from a storytelling perspective, we end each chapter with, "And we nearly got killed by ghosts. Ooh, spooky." Anyway, they're staying in a suite when they get a phone call from Mum's friend Carol, who had recently moved and then broken her leg and was in hospital. She needs Mum to fly back and look after her because she has no one else in her life apparently, and Mum agrees to leave the kids alone in the hotel for several days for plot reasons. I have a question. Why can't Dad just check in on Carol after work every day? I mean, she's going to be in the hospital, so it's not like she's going to be stuck. But nope, Mum abandons her kids, but she'll be damned if she's paying for a suite for 1 less person. So they're going to be stuck in the maid's quarters on the 6th floor, and it has boxes and shit in them. So you don't have the money to pay for a hotel room you've already booked, but you can pay for a last-minute flight back to New York? Why not take the kids with you? The wedding isn't until Saturday. Oh wait, I know. Plot reasons. Left alone, the kids argue whether they should explore or go to the beach. Can't they just explore the beach? But settle on neither and decide to check out their new accommodation, which is 1 room, 601, split into 2 smaller rooms. The thing is though, the receptionist is kind of vague on how to get to the room. The elevator only goes up to the 5th floor, and while looking for the room, Diane goes missing, and Liam gets horribly lost trying to find her. It turns out she was just being a jump scare dick, and they make it to the room where it's pretty shitty with dust and cobwebs and junk. And while they're moaning about it, they hear a really horrible noise, and find some old woman hovering in the doorway. She's dressed like a maid, doesn't speak much English, and she has dead eyes, so of course the kids think she's evil. After the old lady buggers off, the siblings decide to rifle through the boxes that don't belong to them, and Liam shits himself when he finds what he thinks is a human skull. But Diane points out it's just a box of sugar skulls, you big dummy. After that, Liam swears he saw 2 kids in his room and tells his sister, and she decides they were ghosts and doesn't want to hang around the hotel anymore. They go for a walk but realise they've left everything behind in the hotel, so have to go back, where the receptionist tells them they haven't had a chance to clean the rooms. But when they get there, it is clean. Spooky tidying up. Diane sees the ghost kids and screams, and the bellboy comes to tidy, but with the work already done, he decides to tell them about an old maid who used to work there that stabbed her kids to death and cut off their heads. Gee, thanks for that, dude. He leaves having successfully scared the bejesus out of them, and there's a knock at the door, so of course it's the evil ghost maid, brandishing a carving knife. She attacks the kids, but is pretty bumbling, so doesn't manage to do any damage, despite her best efforts. They give this knife-wielding crazy lady the runaround and manage to lock her in one of the rooms, because ghosts can't pass through walls or anything. Then there's another knock on the door, and Mum's back because apparently Carol is fine chilling in the hospital, and doesn't need help after all. But now the Hotel Marlowe is fully booked, so they're gonna have to stay somewhere else. The book ends with the kids being like, well, better hope no one opens that door ever again, because boy, they'll be in for a surprise. Oh well, see ya! Alright book, you do you I suppose. Next up we have Pool Ghoul, where we meet Laura on a bus coming home from summer camp, and it's established she's a bit of a complainer. Like Liam and Diane, she's also 12, and we learn of this girl Tiffany, who seems like the popular bitchy girl. Laura's mum picks her up, along with Sammy the dog, and she tells her there's a surprise waiting for her at home, something she's wanted for ages. And we hear her home is super swanky and modern because Mum is a real estate agent. When she gets home, she finds a swimming pool, still slightly under construction, but seeing as she's part of the swim team, she's over the moon, until she starts screaming at the guy that's building it. I know he was a little bit of a jump scare dick, but no need to be rude. A little while later, we meet Laura's older brother Matt. At least I think he's older, he gives those kind of vibes. Anyway, Matt tells Laura about the weird stuff that Mr. Campbell, the pool builder, has been up to. And okay, sure, he sounds a bit weird, but Laura refers to him as gross, and that's just rude. That night, after watching Jaws, she wakes up at 3 in the morning to her dog growling and goes out to nose at the pool, which is a perfectly normal activity to engage in the middle of the night. But anyway, Laura sees a ball of steam hovering over the pool and hears a splash, despite there not being water in it. The next morning, the pool is being filled for real, and because that's going to take ages, Laura buggers off to her neighbours to get a bunch of pool stuff they're getting rid of, and Matt jump scares her so she gets mad. They spend the better part of a day dragging all the pool stuff home, and with the pool filled, they can now go swimming. But Mum invited that Tiffany chick over. Gee, thanks Mum. Laura jumps in the pool, but dopey dad put way too much chlorine in, so it basically sets fire to her eyeballs, and now no one can go swimming. That night, Laura sees another strange thing during a storm, where the rain is falling hard, but not hitting the pool. You sure there wasn't a pool cover? Next day it's time for school, but Tiffany's being a bitch, and back home, Laura meets Martin, Matt's friend, who is all like, "Oh, by the way, that guy who built your pool? Totally evil." We get a backstory about how the town used to be a Native American reservation, but you know how that turned out, and oh, by the way, Mr. Campbell probably killed Martin's dad. Matt's like, "Great, thanks for that, let's go swim in the pool." But they find Laura's dog pretty drowned in it, except Martin is able to revive him, because this kid's book series is in no way killing off a dog. Anyway, the three of them do a recycling leaflet drop in the neighbourhood, and we learn about their nutty neighbour, Miss Pincher, and her parrot that likes to threaten to kill people. And speaking of killing people, Miss Pincher brings up this company, ChemCorp, who are apparently going to kill them all. She says they're polluting the local river, but they think she's crazy and don't believe her, seeing as their dad works for the company. They go home and ask their dad, who admits that ChemCorp and his boss are a bag of dicks, which is why he was hired to turn that shit around. Laura complains the pool is haunted, tells them about the dog, and gets freaked out by the pool cleaner, which seems to be malfunctioning. Dad says it's nothing to worry about, it's just a few teething problems, and Mum suggests they have a pool party, which Laura agrees to. But Tiffany thinks it'll kill them all, and why is she friends with this ass face? Matt wakes her up in the night to show her how the pool noodles are moving on their own, and they spell out the word no. Maybe they were trying to spell out noodles, but there weren't enough of them. She wakes up in the morning wondering if it was just a dream, but doesn't decide to check with Matt, which seems dumb. There's a ChemCorp protest going on TV, and Miss Pincher is dragged off by Mr. Campbell, and everyone is mad about it. At the end of the week, they have a pool party, and make Tiffany get in first, who survives, so they all get in. They have a splash around until the shark floaty grabs Tiffany by the leg, drags her around, and twats her head on the concrete. Everyone is sent home, but of course Mum and Dad don't believe that an inanimate object could attack someone, but then the pool decides to fill with blood. The next day, Matt announces he has a scout hike, and Mum says he has to take Laura with him because she's too young to stay home by herself. That didn't stop Liam and Diane's mum leaving her kids alone in a different state, did it? On the hike, Laura falls into a hole and discovers a cave, which she, Matt, and Martin explore. It's full of bats, and they discover a bunch of recycling that's been dumped, and then run into Mr. Campbell, who threatens them with a gun. He ties the siblings up with Miss Pincher, who's suddenly there, and dumps a load of recycling on them, courtesy of ChemCorp. As night falls, they manage to free themselves, and where did Martin go? If he's not a bad guy, then how did he not hear all this noise or wonder where his hiking buddies went? They make their way out of the cave, but Mr. Campbell is still there and tries to shoot them, but there he is! Martin dive tackles him to the ground. He's brought the police and their parents, and Mr. Campbell is arrested. The following day, the pool is absolutely fine, and Martin explains that because the caves run under the house, the spirits of his people were trying to warn them about Mr. Campbell and his shitty idea of a recycling program. Madness at the Mall was one of my favourites and was the very last book in the series, so it definitely went out with a bang. We meet Frank, who is, you guessed it, 12 years old, and he's excited for his date with his crush Deanna. They're going to see a horror movie at the mall cinema, despite her friends not approving. But there's a spanner in the works when Frank forgets to turn in his homework and a note is sent home to his parents. He goes home where we meet Tom, Frank's 8-year-old brother, and Frank finds out that his parents are going out that night, so he's lumbered with babysitting duty. Frank explains the situation to his mum, and it seems like she's going to let him go, until he shows her the note from school and she's like, nope. Tom goes to console his brother and mentions a rumour that the mall is haunted by the ghosts of animals. So that's fun. Frank's kinda screwed because he doesn't have Deanna's phone number to cancel and social media hasn't been invented yet. But Tom's distracted by a video game he's playing called Animal Pursuit, which is going to be super plot important soon. Frank tries to trick his brother to go to the mall, but Tom sees right through it, so he bribes him. Turns out they concocted this plan while their parents are still home, so they casually ask their dad, who helped to build the mall, if it's true that he plopped it on top of an animal cemetery. And he's like, nah, so they drop the subject. After their parents finally leave for the night, the kids hop on their bikes, ride towards the mall, experience a minor earthquake, and meet up with Deanna, who is like, sure, whatever, let's all go see the movie. When the movie ends, another earthquake hits, so Deanna runs away, so Frank and Tom go through the emergency exit and get lost in the mall, which is suddenly completely abandoned. They try to make it back to the cinema, but another quake hits, turning all the power on in the arcade, and sending the security gates into a frenzy. Frank gets his leg trapped in a security gate, but only for a minute, and they shoplift a candy store to cheer themselves up. Their merriment doesn't last long when the brothers discover that the fountain Tom was tempted to splash around in is full of acid, and the escalator gets possessed and eats Tom's shoe. Frank tries to logically explain what's going on, but he can't explain the invisible creature that bites his hand as he tries to reach a new pair of shoes for Tom through a gate that's going on a frenzy. They theorize that maybe some of the animals have escaped the pet store, which is why they can hear strange footsteps, and why Frank has a freaking boa constrictor wrapped around his arm. They head into an electronics store in the hopes of finding a phone, and they try to call 911, but the computers all display the same message: 911 can't help you now. And that part put the shits into me when I was little. On one of the screens, a game of Animal Pursuit is being played. But this time, the maze is the mall, and the boys are at the bottom of the food chain. By messing with the keyboard, the boys can see the animals that attack them. The snake, the invisible creature that turned out to be a guinea pig, and it looks like every part of the mall is full of animals that want them dead. They try to shut down the game, but they're not allowed, and the animals want revenge because they're the kids of the guy who absolutely did not drop a mall on an animal graveyard. They email their parents from the possessed computer, but with the animals closing in, they have to leave the store, but they pick up some walkie-talkies on the way. Frank wants to try another phone, one that isn't haunted, but with no way to know where the animals are going to attack from, he sends Tom to camp out by the computer and let him know where they all are. Wait, I thought you just said it was too dangerous to stay in the store. Forget it. Frank arms himself with scissors and is warned to duck to avoid, well, ducks. He avoids a cat and jumps over some mice, but a pack of dogs rush him, and he has to climb one of the gates. But a dog bites his ankle and he has to kick it to the ground. Poor pup. The dogs were the final boss, and Tom thinks the game is over, but nope, it's on to level 2, where the animals are numerous and bitey. With no clear path, Tom uses the computer to levitate Frank above the ground, avoiding snapping turtles, hamsters, and cannibalistic fish. The floor is covered in snakes, so Tom floats Frank over them to the phone, but moves him away again before he can get a full message to 911, because some animals attack again. Tom whisks Frank back to where he is, but they both stupidly leave the store, and the security gate crashes down, trapping them both out. They decide to head back to the cinema, seeing as there were no animals there, but they're attacked by a cat, so Frank stabs it with his scissors, which mildly inconveniences it. As they approach the cinema, they see a ring of light and are drawn towards it against their will, where all the animals have gathered and are about to attack them, when Dad shows up to rescue them. The police are there too, but there's no evidence of any animals. The damage to their clothes is no longer there, and Frank thinks they must have imagined it all, until he discovers the scissors that he used on the cat are covered with blood. And that's it! But wait, how did these animals become haunting, scary things? And is Dad just going to get away with sticking a maul on a gravesite? I have so many questions. Last up, we have my favourite Shivers book, and the only one I have held on to for over 20 years. Beware of the Bog Girl. We meet Julie, who, for a change of pace, is 10 years old, and apparently she's a bit of a troublemaker who always seems to get into mishaps, which is bad for her worrisome father, a marine biologist who is taking Julie, but not Mum or baby Joe, to Mossland Island, which is a bit of a mouthful, for the summer to study some type of crab. Julie is very excited to be living at the beach for the summer, but she's less impressed by the bog they have to drive through, which gives way to ghosts! But not really, because the way the Spanish moss is hanging from the trees in the fading light looks kinda spooky. They make it to where they'll be staying, which is a frickin' mansion with a weird double button light switch, and finds a massive bedroom that clearly belonged to a little girl. She goes a bit nuts trying on the dresses, messing with the tea set and getting on the bed so big it requires a tiny stepladder, but then she hears a terrible moan and is like, nope! She calls her dad, who says it was probably an animal, but they discover a balcony with a trail of muddy child's footprints on it. Dad says it's probably a local kid curious about the new arrivals, but locks the door just to be safe. That's smart. Julie notices a nice grooming set on a vanity, but Dad doesn't want her staying in the room in case she breaks something, but she convinces him to let her with the promise she'll be careful. When she's just drifting off to sleep, the weird moaning wakes her up again and she's threatened by a creepy voice who doesn't appreciate her stuff being touched. In the morning, the footprints are back and Julie convinces herself that it's just a kid playing tricks, so goes into town. In the local bakery, Julie meets a girl her age named Lucy, who says the islanders have magical powers and speaks Gullah, so Julie invites her to hang out sometime. The next day, Lucy comes to visit, but is spooked by the house, saying it's haunted and the girl's room is super spooky haunted. Woo! Lucy takes her into the house and shows Julie a portrait of the family that used to live there, pointing out they were plantation owners. Fun. And their granddaughter Eugenie, who was a right diva bitch, and one night, after not getting her own way, she ran away to the bog and was never seen again. Now she comes back to haunt the house as a muddy creature known as the Bog Girl, so beware and whatnot. The pair go off together, with Lucy offering to show Julie all the cool places to go on the island. But Julie wants to go to the bog because she straight up plans to kill the Bog Girl. I'm sorry, what? They go and poke the bog for a while, find the spot Eugenie died in, and Julie nearly falls in before the Bog Girl tries to drag her under, so Lucy has to rescue her, and they leg it pretty sharpish. The incident makes Julie want to find out more, so Lucy offers to take her to see her Aunt Victoria, a medicine woman. She says she can help, but only once they've seen the Bog Girl for real, not heard her voice or felt her effects, so they plan to booby-trap the balcony back at the mansion. With no money to buy stuff to home alone the place, they instead plan to have a tea party using all of Eugenie's stuff to draw her out. They dick around with her things, which royally pisses her off, and she bursts in. She's basically made of sand and mud and goop with a dress of snakes, and she attacks them, but Julie melts one of her arms off with hot tea. The Bog Girl doesn't appreciate that gesture and grows it back and tries to suffocate Julie, so Lucy threatens to smash her stuff unless she sods off. After she leaves, Dad comes in and yells at them for trashing the room, and then Lucy gets mad at Julie for almost getting them killed. This is going well. The next day, Julie goes with her dad to study the crabs and learns that if they're cut off from their water source, they'll quickly dry up and die, which is useful information for her much bigger problem. The day after, Julie goes to the bog by herself and winds up the Bog Girl enough for her to chase her, so she hops on a bike and draws her away until she dries up completely. Good job, Julie! Except it starts to rain and the Bog Girl reforms. The pair get into a pretty vicious fight, but Lucy comes to the rescue by temporarily beheading the Bog Girl with a stick. The pair go back to Aunt Victoria's, but she's not home, so they mooch through her stuff until they find a spell to stop the Bog Girl. But one of the ingredients is pain in the form of tears, screams, or blood, so they decide on screams. Good choice! They go to a dusty field with their ingredients and make a circle, putting their unspecified ghost bait inside, which lures the Bog Girl to them and she gets trapped inside. But remember that pain element? Well, the girls didn't, and she escapes back into the bog. Having had enough, Lucy decides to take the fight to her and they hop in a canoe, but of course the Bog Girl just attacks them. They trap her in the canoe, somehow, through the power of friendship or something, until she dries up and they decide to crumble up the body, scatter it about, and hope it doesn't rain. Or you could put her remains in a metal box and bury that sucker so she can never reform again. They don't, of course, and it luckily doesn't rain for 2 months, so they have peace and quiet until the day they leave, when it decides to rain and the Bog Girl reforms. So there we go, those were the 4 most memorable books for me, because there's no way in hell I'm rebuying and rereading The Spider Kingdom. The thing in Room 601's setting was probably the most memorable thing about it, because it ended rather abruptly. Pool Ghoul had the most cohesive storyline and a reason for the strange occurrences. Madness at the Mall had the most unique idea behind it. And Beware of the Bog Girl genuinely scared me as a child because that thing attacks them like 5 times. Of course, as an adult, these books aren't scary, but they were an inherent part of my childhood and my interest in horror from a young age. Finally, I've got to give a shout out to Eddie Rosebloom, who illustrated all the covers, because those images have really stuck with me my whole life. So there you have it. That was Shivers. Did you read these books as a kid, and what were your favourite stories? Let me know in the comments below or come say hi on social media. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, it really does mean a lot. Or consider subscribing if you want more videos like this one. Join me next time where I'll be talking about a kids' instructional TV show. I'll speak to you soon, and thanks for watching.